family mode.
Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Apologies for the slight delay on the start. I hope you did have a chance to check out some of the upcoming webinars. I'm presenting another session on source control for Oracle in a couple of weeks, and at the end of April there's quite an interesting session presented by Saeed Jafar Hussain. He'll be looking at how to manage and troubleshoot cluster environments. So please do register for those sessions at redgate.com/oracle-webinars. As I mentioned before, you can also access an archive of all previous webinars there as well. There's a great selection of different presentations by some of the best presenters from the Oracle space, so please do check those out as well. I think there's something like there's sort of over 30 different sessions in there now. As always, as we go through today's presentation, please do share what you're learning with the wider community. There's a couple of, if you're sharing it on Twitter, please do mention @Redgate, and I'll put some suggested hashtags there as well, but please feel free to add your own hashtags in there. As always, this session is brought to you by the Deployment Suite for Oracle and Redgate software. So the main presenter today is Kellyn Pot'Vin. You can connect with Kellyn on Twitter at DBA Kevlar. Again, if you're sharing this with your community through Twitter, please obviously mention Kellyn as well. Kellyn's an Oracle Ace. She's director for the training days from the Rocky Mountain Oracle User Group. She's senior technical consultant at Enketic. Kellyn will tell you a little bit more about herself when she comes on air. As always, I'm James Mercer. You can connect with me, or follow me rather, at All Things Oracle. I'm the creator and editor of allthingsoracle.com, and I work at Redgate Software. A couple of points before we start. Everybody will be on mute for the duration of the event. If at any time you can't hear me or my sound goes a bit weird, those of you that have attended these sessions regularly will know that sometimes we do struggle with sound. But please do let me know, and hopefully we can sort that out. Of course, it's always a good idea to check your own audio settings first, but as I say, if you're having difficulties, please let me know. There will be a Q&A session with Kellyn at the end of her presentation. We won't be able to answer any questions until that point, but as Kellyn goes through some of the things, if you kind of feel that you want certain bits expanded on, or you think of questions as Kellyn goes along, please do add these questions in the questions panel. Firstly, that will help us get going with the Q&A quickly, but also it's just to make sure that you don't kind of forget things that maybe you wanted to ask during the session. This webinar is being recorded, and a full recording will be put up online, again at redgate.com/oracle-webinars. So the structure of today's session, we're going to have a quick introduction to Redgate software before Kellyn takes over control of the screen for the bit that you really want to hear, which is how to become friends with developers and stop making DBA stand for don't bother asking. So that's the topic of today's session. Then there'll be a Q&A with Kellyn Pot'Vin. If you'd like to have a look at source control for Oracle, I'll mention this in a minute. Please do hang around after the presentation, where we'll be doing a live demonstration. So for those of you that come to the sessions regularly, I appreciate that you've kind of heard me sort of say this a few times. I do hope you've had a chance to check out Redgate, go to our website and kind of find out a little bit more information about us. For those of you that are new to this, and this is your first webinar, you may not have heard about Redgate, you may not know about us, or you may have just kind of sort of heard the name through the webinars. The webinars, I mean, this is a big part of what we do as a company in terms of supporting people using the technologies that we produce products for. So we're a software vendor. We produce tools for SQL Server and Oracle developers and DBAs, as well as .NET developers. We've got 45 tools. This slide does need a little bit of updating because we've got well over 600,000 users now. We've been around for sort of nearly 14 years, based in Cambridge in the UK. One thing I want to sort of draw your attention to, rather than just the number of people that are using our products, the number of products that we have, is what our users say about us. And you can see there's a little pie chart in the bottom right-hand corner there about our support rating. This is not just the technical support that we offer people using our products, but this is things like our webinars. We run a number of websites, so all things Oracle, and this webinar program just fits into a whole host of activities that we do for people to help them learn new skills, to develop their own understanding of the technology that they're working within, and obviously to help them use our products as well. On the Oracle side of things, we have a number of tools that make up the deployment suite for Oracle. You can find out more about that at redgate.com/Oracle, but the main products we have is a tool for comparing and deploying schema from different environments. There's a schema compare for Oracle. We have another one that does the same for data as well. So this is certainly something that's missing in kind of other offerings for migrating data from environment to another environment, or just checking that things are the same. And then the new product that we have is source control for Oracle. This is the product that I'm going to do a demonstration of after Kellyn's presentation, and as you can imagine, we've designed this tool to make it much easier for you to check changes into source control and to share those with other members of the team. So if you have difficulties with source control at the moment, or you're looking for a better way of doing it, then I'd recommend hanging around afterwards and seeing a demonstration of that tool. Obviously, you can find out more about all of these at redgate.com/Oracle. Similarly, if in terms of the education stuff that I'm doing, these free webinars, as I say, I manage, I set up and edit all things oracle.com. We also give away a number of free ebooks. You can find out all about that at redgate.com/Oracle-education. Of course, please feel free just to visit allthingsoracle.com as well. Okay, so I think that's enough about Redgate. I hope you will hang around after this presentation. I'm now going to hand over to Kellyn to go over her presentation, which is how to become friends with developers and stop making DBA stand for don't bother asking. I'm in the UK, Kellyn's in the US, so we're going to do a quick switch over of the screen. Hopefully things go smoothly, but please bear with me as I hand everything over to Kellyn. So I can see that clearly, Kellyn, so I shall leave everything with you. Hi, Kellyn. Sorry, I think we had a couple of issues with your mic.
There, can you hear me now?
Hi, Kellyn.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes. Okay, so I think you have to go back to the beginning because I couldn't hear anything up until this point.
No problem. This is actually, we're on to the second page here. We're actually, we're past this. There we go.
Okay, thanks, Kellyn. I shall leave everything with you now.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Good morning, everyone. I know it's morning here. It's probably afternoon for a number of you, but it's still only 10 a.m. here in Denver. My name is Kellyn Pot'Vin. I am out of Westminster, Colorado. I've dressed kind of for spring, but yes, we still have about 7 or 8 inches of snow in a lot of areas out here, which is good for us because we can use the moisture. I am an Oracle ACE, Senior Technical Specialist at Encatech. My company is a wonderful company out of Dallas, which is much warmer than here. And they let me work from home and get to work on Exadatas and all kinds of cool stuff. So great company to work for. I specialize in performance and enterprise management of large database environments. I'd say about 90% of my databases are over 1 terabyte that I've worked in my history, and I do enjoy the larger database environments. I'm not much of an OLTP database administrator, just never worked in it much, and I like seeing those big, huge monster challenges. I am on the board of directors for RMUG. I was the director of the Training Days conferences last year and have already started on the 2014 one. I don't know why my slides are moving. I'm not done yet. And I'm also the database track lead for Kscope 2013. I blog at DBA Kevlar, and I also tweet a lot at DBA Kevlar on Twitter. Any of you that are interested in the Expert EM12C book, I get a lot of questions of when it's coming out. The date right now is May 16th, and it looks like we're actually going to keep that. I'm looking forward to seeing that book be done and out the door, so we're doing some final revisions, closing up chapters, sending them to the publisher. So any of you that are interested in that book, it's looking pretty good right now. So why this topic? This topic here is incredibly important to me. As a DBA going into the field, I started out in customer service when I was younger, and then getting into a specialized group at US West when they made me a DBA from there. I was used to working very closely with clients. A lot of my clients were attorneys, things like that, for the Law Group Technology Service when I was there. And I didn't really understand the idea that you could have one group not like another. I thought a database was a database. I had come into the DBA world a little differently than a lot of other people. Everywhere I seem to go, I seem to kind of run into this interesting challenge of, I'd read about it in blogs, I'd read about it in articles. Some of my biggest wins I've been in where, developers said, when you came into this company, I really didn't think too much of you. You were telling me, oh, we're locking down production. I've refreshed development. It's ready for you. You will not be releasing code into development directly anymore because I don't want to set you up to fail. I want you to have a good development arena. And at first they're thinking, who is this chick? And after a while they start saying, I really kind of liked it. I didn't have people standing at my desk going, what were you doing? Why is your code broken? The DBAs were up all night. So it was something that was, personal to me, of working in a team environment and doing the right thing versus, being right. A lot of times people confuse those two different things. They're saying, I'm right here. It doesn't matter if I'm doing the right thing. And, when first learning, I didn't understand at first why also people were searching me out when I kept thinking, but so-and-so knows so much more about me, about this topic than I do. They're so much more technically skilled. But Kellyn, I like working with you. I trust you. I'd like to come back to you and work on this. Is that all right? Well, sure. I don't mind learning about it. It was because I was willing to work with them. I didn't insult them. I didn't degrade them. I respected their skill set and what they brought, no matter if they were an application analyst, DBA, a developer. Everybody had something valuable to offer. So when this started, my first official DBA job was an interesting one where I had worked to learn Oracle and then got into the company. And they said, we have this huge SQL Server database. You need to manage it. Never worked on SQL Server before. The SQL Server DBA that had been there prior to me had kind of been worked out of the company. Oh, it's a SQL Server. You don't need a DBA for this, was the feeling that I'd been given, the words I'd heard. And I said, okay, I'll take it on. I'd never met the previous SQL Server DBA. No one else knew SQL Server. And the lead DBA, I went to her and I said, okay, who do I need to talk to? Who knows about this product? who's the support person? Who's the developers? How do I know? Oh, they're up on the 22nd floor, but you're not allowed to talk to them. I said, why? And they said, the dev app group, we're not on speaking terms with them. So I went back to my desk, did as I was told, and tried to work through this challenge. So for 2 weeks, I dug my heels in, and I just wasn't getting anywhere. So I found out where the app and dev manager resided on the 22nd floor, and I went and sat down in his cube, and I said, I hear that the DBA group and your group aren't on speaking terms. I think that sucks, and I'd like to change that. From that point on, he and I were buddies. We worked together quite closely. He got me the phone number of the previous SQL Server DBA, who took considerable time training me on how to manage that SQL Server, and it was not small. This was the bread and butter of this company. It wasn't on an Oracle system, it was on SQL Server. And honestly, if this was not recoverable, after 2 days, the company was gone. It was extremely important to the company. Just as we're talking about development in DBA, SQL Server seems to have that same kind of role in the Oracle world of, oh, SQL Server. I do go to the dark side, as some people say. I do like SQL Server, and this DBA happened to be an amazingly skilled gentleman. I'm still friends with him to this day, and I have great respect for his skill set. I got to sit down and work with the development group from this system, learned everything about it, and became their DBA. It was a great experience, and when times got tough for this company in 4 years, I was protected. I was taken care of by that group. I think that was extremely important, where there was some strife with some of the other people, of course, and as you were saying, this lead DBA for this group had a tendency to be a little bit more of a bully in that and pick out enemies and kind of come up with her niche, and who everybody else was garbage. You knew you were safe with this group, and it was extremely important, and I took that with me. There should never be, as you can see on that right, that picture, a Berlin Wall between you and your dev and apps groups. You need them to do your job. So here's the ball and chain. I kind of like this comment that I found out there when I was looking through articles on this subject. In the end, they are somewhat akin to a husband and wife who don't like each other but can't get a divorce. We're in it together. There's no separating the what do you say, the valuables and the children and the pets, and taking the assets and going our own way. It really isn't. I think as a DBA, you are in this world, and you need to do the right thing. We all have to share and play nice together. We're all in the same sandbox. But we do have different goals. When you look at a developer's goals, to implement the new business enhancements, often by a deadline. A lot of them are sitting there being told, you have, 2 weeks to get this out. I need it out. A database administrator, their job is to make sure that's accessible and functioning 24/7. No interruption of service. Well, those kind of contradict each other. And then you've got those outside influencers. They want what they want, and they want it done in a certain time, and they're really not keen on what the other two's goals are. I've sat there and listened to a product manager tell me, well, I need this implemented to production today. It needs to go in today. And the developer's like, but it doesn't work. And they're like, well, I don't care. I want it in production today. And you have to sit there as the DBA and be the gatekeeper and say, the developer just told you it doesn't work. You need to be, sensitive to this. My slides seem to be having a life of their own. I apologize, as some of these are moving forward on me. So the negative culture, let me fix this real quick because I'm trying to figure out what's causing my slides to change. There we go. Hopefully that will stop it. I'm not sure exactly where that setting came from. Not too crazy about this. I think it's set on the actual template, so I apologize.
Hi, Kellyn.
Yes.
We just had a comment in from Kevin Garlow. Thank you, Kevin, for this tip, but you should be able to go to slideshow and just untick the box, use timings.
Yeah, I had done that. Slideshow use. Is that where that's coming?
And then save it. I'm guessing, hopefully that should work. So
Let's
thank you very much, Kevin,
try.
for that tip.
Thank you, yes. I've never had that happen before, and I wasn't crazy about it. Okay, let's see if we can go from here now. Thank you very much. So the negative culture, these are just a few comments that I found online and that I've heard. You know, we can listen to these and think about these, and you know, we've all heard them, you know, or at least something similar. DBAs aren't happy unless they're well established as a bottleneck in the development process. I like this one. If Shakespeare were alive in 2012, he'd be a technical writer, and his motto would be "Kill the DBAs." Why does it take 2 developers to change a light bulb? Because one always leaves in the middle of a project. And this last one here, the only way I know to deal with developers involves a bat. That one was actually said to me personally. I wasn't real crazy about it. But I want us to actually think about these and replace the word DBA or developer with like a minority or racial group. And you think about that and start hearing these in your head, and you realize that what may be culturally acceptable in our workplace would never be acceptable at all. You know, we do accept prejudice among different DBA and development groups, and that's saying it's all right to put these people in one group and be prejudiced against them and not respect their skill set and not respect them for what they bring to the workplace. And that's what we're trying to kind of break down and say, you know, this isn't right. This isn't the way to be productive in a team environment. This was another thing that I found funny. I found a variation of these actual tables, and I kind of created my own from it. But I found this very interesting, is that, you know, you start looking at the left and the right of each one of these. You know, your code sucks. Yeah, you're not getting to, you know, 2 terabytes for this. Why would you ever do this? And then you look at the right and it's, well, this is brilliant. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. You know, you can't just tell people what they want to hear. But sometimes saying what's disrespectful isn't any better either. Both of them are unproductive. Both of them do not get you to the goal that you need to be at. Where the borderline one, you know, oh, well, this was an interesting coding choice, or you need 2 terabytes of space for this. Some of these they're borderline. You could probably get away with it if you knew the person well, or if you were joking. And then you look at the actual safe lines, and those are really what we want to get to. You know, would you like to work on this together? You know, we could rewrite this to use less temp. You know, I'd like to recommend an alternative strategy, saying, you know, I'm recommending this. Working with somebody respectfully, using words that are productive to the conversation is incredibly valuable. And, you know, this was the DBA's way of, you know, how to talk to a developer, but there's also, you can change this around and say, you know, how does the developer work with the DBAs? You know, we always want to think we're correct. I mean, you know, we as DBAs, we've become that way because, yeah, we probably have some kind of control issues. You need that for a gatekeeper. When those control issues become too overbearing, that's when we always have our challenge. So we got those same lines to the left and the right of, you know, saying nothing's changed, the database sucks, it worked great in dev and test, versus, you know, oh, you're absolutely correct. You know, neither one of those are productive to the conversation. They don't get us to our goal. You know, they only cause issues. Versus saying, you know, borderline, could something have changed? You know, versus saying, you know, I know something's always changed. Database is always changing, so we know something's wrong here. I've got to figure it out. Could you help me check out the database? You know, I could really use your help figuring out why this is having issues in prod. Those are conversations that I've had with many developers where they're like, Kellyn, you know, I'm seeing something, I'm looking at the EM grid and I see pink. I'm not sure what this other means. I just know that there's a problem. Could you help me? Those are productive ways to communicate with each other that creates a team environment, that creates collaboration and gets you to your goal, and you're working towards the business's goal, which is the important part of this process. So we lack respect. Why? We have those deadlines. We have people standing over our, shoulders saying, I need this today. I want this yesterday. Demands of each group are very, very different. We realize that. We realize, we've talked about that a little bit. Lack of respect for each other's skill set. A lot of times we don't respect what we don't understand or we don't know. Sometimes we think we know it or we think we know it better. It's important to realize that every person has something valuable to offer, even when they don't seem that skilled in the area that they're working in. There's something valuable that they're there for. And if you can focus on that, a lot of times you can help them be better at their jobs as well as they help you be better at yours. I like this picture because I do think a lot of times we do think, oh, I'm Obi-Wan. I'm Obi-Wan and they're Darth Vader, and it really doesn't need to be that way. It shouldn't be good guy, bad guy. It never should be in the environment. So what are the results of this? It impacts productivity terribly. I'm in an environment right now, a client that has adopted me thoroughly because they did have a DBA that would rather be a roadblock. I worked very hard to have him kind of move to another project because he wasn't interested in allowing the developers and the product managers to be productive and get to their goals. They really didn't think that they were going to be able to reach production until June, and they actually released last month because we had to make this major change. There were that many roadblocks being put together by a DBA. It causes turnover, huge amounts of turnover, and it eliminates positions. Often, I know I myself, if I'm not happy in my workplace, I'm not going to stay. A lot of people felt that they were just lucky to have me for a short period of time when there were these kind of issues where I just said, I've got to go somewhere where I'm happy. If I'm not happy, if I'm not productive, there's no reason for me to be here. Eliminating positions, I've seen and talked to a lot of development groups that said, we don't have a DBA anymore. It was just such a headache that we looked at, so-and-so and said, well, you can do the backups through the enterprise manager, or, the network admins can back it up through Tivoli, so we're not going to have a DBA and we'll just hollow along. It costs business dollars. When people are standing in the way of making productive decisions and doing things for the right reasons instead of control, it costs companies a lot of money. It costs company resources. It's not the way to do business. And it's not professional when you start thinking about it either. This is more my opinion. I do believe that the demands on the developers to fill the DBA positions, hopes of meeting deadlines, happens very, very often. I can't get over how many developers that I've spoke with that have admitted to me, I wish I had a DBA like you. I wish I had DBAs that were open to it, but they weren't, so we just didn't have them. We got rid of them. The reasons for Agile-like development processes a lot of times were to force people for Scrum meetings and everything to work together. They had a sprint. They were forced, you have to get this done in 2 weeks. Think about that. Think about how that actually forces people that may have considered before to be a roadblock going, now I'm not allowed to. And it makes more demands for open source tools. A lot of people that when you're looking at these conversations online about, why DBAs and developers can't get along have said, well, that's why I write everything outside the database. That's why I'm using ORM. This is why I'm using, object-oriented. Anything I can do to work outside the database, I'm going to do because I can't wait for that DBA. I can't, fight with them. So why are DBAs needed? It really does require a different mindset, I think, for a DBA as well as a developer. I can pick out a DBA, even in a development role, if I feel that they've been, misplaced very quickly. You see those, I joke, you see the control issues. You see that they're going, well, no, we don't want to impact production. We want to do this right. You see those, that little bit of OCD personality that really does benefit the DBA role versus a developer that usually is very, very quick on their feet and they're thinking very fluid and they're extremely bright people and they're designing. You will have people that are hybrid that are between the two, but usually somebody will fall one way or the other, and that usually tells you. When you play both those roles, it is kind of a conflict of interest. It does leave priorities unaddressed. Often when somebody is expected to play both of them, they're lacking in, let's say, backup security. Maintenance jobs aren't being performed. You've got those areas of the database administrator's role that they're going to focus on, that when they're expected to be spread so thin between development and DBA, it won't occur. It also lessens the expertise. I mean, anybody, you can only keep so much in your brain. So why do we need developers? As I was saying, it's, they have to visualize and design the process. They're very fluid thinkers, and they're actually thinking outside the box a lot of times. DBA may reel them in and say, this is beautiful. I don't know if anybody's ever seen Evolution of a Developer. It's kind of a fun little joke where it says, the first set of code says echo hello, and it returns hello. And they keep writing, and it gets fancier and fancier until you have like 5,000 lines of code, but at the end it still just returns hello. And the DBA's job is kind of say, keep it simple. This is beautiful. I know you did this incredibly complex design, but it's not the right thing for the database. The database doesn't need to be doing all this work. Let's simplify it. So I think having that balance is incredibly important, and that's one of those reasons, when you're seeing this. When, again, we're looking at a developer that has to do a DBA role, they're then expected to do after-hours support. They're expected to do, maintenance work, all these other things. Again, you're spreading that fluid mindset that's supposed to be thinking during the business hours and giving you these really brilliant, bright solutions that the DBA then can say, this is really, really cool, but it's not the right answer for our system because of A, B, and C, along with, hey, I need to do this maintenance this weekend, or, hey, I know you came up with this great idea of using HCC in the Exadata, but guess what? They have an ODA in development, and it's not backward. We can't refresh to development. Having that ability to have that second set of eyes, and that eyes that is focused on this little bit different goal, it's essential. It's important. So how do we change this game? How do we change it? Identify the source of the conflict. A lot of times you're going to see it can be incredibly different depending on the company. Some are very centralized. You'll see it where it's just one group against another group. Some it's just one individual against another individual. You're talking about a personality conflict. Other times you're going to have it that it's cultural to an organization. I have worked in an organization where development was in charge of the DBA group. And if they said something was going to production, 4 times a day without testing, it was all right. I will also tell you that environment had 40% data corruption. It was scary. I ended up having to go to HR and say, it is a conflict of interest to have the DBA group report to development, and I moved them to operations. It was a fight. It's a challenge. But realizing and recognizing what the true problem was is incredibly important. And find out, are there outside contributors? I had a developer stand, at the end of my desk and say, this code doesn't work, and the project manager is pushing it into the release. What do I do? Finding out that the project manager was the problem because his goal was to meet his deadlines. It didn't matter if the code worked. The developer was the unfortunate victim here, and I, as the DBA, had to be the protective gatekeeper to say, this code doesn't work. I know it doesn't work. It's not going to production. So understanding who the contributor is that's impacting the actual issue is incredibly important. So how do you stand up to the fight? You got to find somebody who can buy into it that has the power to do so. I mean, I've joked that there's a couple managers I know that will take, on the 3-headed dragon with the sword, and it's incredibly important to find those people. Good bosses are not a dime a dozen. Focus on why you need this change. A lot of times if you say so-and-so is a jerk, that's not going to go over well. When you say it is a cost to resources, deadlines, goals, revenues, and people say, but we met our deadline. If you go back and say, well, we can do it twice, or we can do it right. How do we do this? How do we change so that we're doing it right instead of 2, 3, 4 times? That's what I'm saying when I'm saying deadlines here. Goals, when people say, hey, we want to reach this goal, and this person is roadblocking us and stopping us from reaching the goal. Do they have reasons behind reaching the goal? Start taking down why they've stopped you. What was the roadblock that they came up with this next time that you can't do it? Revenue, what is the cost to the company when something is an issue between the two groups? Find out what it actually costs you, And then the resources, how much turnover you're going through. How many people are you losing? You know, resources is in how many people are working after hours to fix what somebody pushed through, or how many people are waiting on the bench because someone won't let something go through that should have. Changing the culture, not assigning the blame. Like I said, you know, so-and-so is a jerk, or saying this is all the development group's problem, or this is all the DBA group's problem. Recognize exactly what's going on, the dynamics of the actual combination. A lot of times it's more than one, and figuring out exactly what is going on and how to diffuse it is important. So what as a DBA can we do? Learning to code. If you're a DBA that doesn't code in any way, if you don't, you may write some SQL, yeah, that's okay, but learn how to code. It doesn't matter if it's Shell, .NET, Perl, whatever you want to do. Some platform, pick it up, learn how to do it. You learn to respect even more when you can do it yourself. Learn the database. The best DBAs know their data. I think that's incredibly important. People respect those that really understand what's going on inside the actual environment. Participate in code reviews. Be productive, be part of it as early as possible. It helps people. No one likes to be told, oh, I'm glad you want to put this to production tomorrow, but you didn't think about A, B, and C. At that final hour is just not a good time to bring it up. It's better if you're addressing it from the beginning so people have the information they know to be successful, or they need to know to be successful. Give read-only access to key developers to production. A lot of people are against this. I am for this. You know, even though I am a big believer also in giving, you know, making sure developers have full access in development to databases that look just like production. Having the read-only access to dev or to prod is incredibly important, and it's people that you trust. They are in this together with you. You know, there's going to be security reasons, things like that, that they may not be allowed certain data. I understand that limitation, but anytime that you do have the ability to do this, think about it. Share with developers what you know. It shouldn't look like magic. A lot of DBAs will not answer people straight. You know, they'll say, oh, it's a top secret. Oh, it's just, I fixed it. Don't worry about it. The more that you share, it doesn't make you, you know, less of an asset. You know, when you're hiding information, making sure you're the only person who knows how to do something, you're actually a liability to that company. You know, if you're, you know, you can joke about, oh, what if you're hit by a bus or anything else, but it really is, the more people that understand what's going on, the more people that they know more about what you do and the value that you provide, it's not that you're less important. So definitely share. Don't make decisions based on control. People don't trust those that just say, because I said so. You know, they need to understand why something can't happen, and there needs to be data behind it. You know, you're not releasing that code. It's junk. That offers no value to an actual developer. To actually say to a developer, you know, I'm concerned about this piece of code because we actually tested it and there was impact to this other project. That's different. I mean, if you're trying to come up with some details and actually state to them, this is the reason I'm concerned about it. Let's go back and validate this real quick before we go any farther. It's important to tell them, I don't want you to be the reason this person shows up and says, why did you impact my project with your code? It's, I'm watching out for you. That's a very different scenario. And again, never assume. You know, if somebody starts pushing on you and says, you know, I need an answer now, or an answer now. I think we've all had that one person standing on our desk. Tell them straight out, you know, I can give you an answer now, but I'd rather give you the right answer, and I just need a little bit of time. You know, it's worth it to you and to me. I have one friend who told me that he just tells people, oh, it's a network problem, so they'll go bother the network admin, and the network admin never minds because he's like, oh, I told you guys to replace that hardware like 3 months ago, and then it makes them go away, and it gives the DBA enough time to do the research. So there's a number of ways of getting that, but I do believe in being honest and just saying I'd rather have the time to do the research so I get you the right answer. So the options for developers, because this is a two-way street. You know, it's never, as much as I look at it personally from the DBA perspective, it's never really one way. You know, we expect the same from developers too. Educate yourself on how the optimizer works. The cost-based optimizer is so important to developers, and a lot of times it's so complex, and to not understand it and not know anything about it, it impacts them. Developing outside of Oracle and then coming into this world and having to develop within it. If you don't understand the cost-based optimizer, it will bite you. Help with production issues. You are an integral part of this. You understand the code, you know the focus, and if you look at something, you may quickly identify an issue with a release that we as DBAs have no idea about because we may not have been included in the project. There's all different reasons that we wouldn't have caught it that you would. You know the code from beginning to end. Build your code to perform efficiently, not just functionally. A lot of times you will have developers that come back and say, but it works. We're willing to help you with that. There's no question about it. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but make sure that it's efficient too. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of ways that we can help guarantee that, but make sure that it's not going to be an impact to the production environment, what you're putting in there. Share your knowledge with the database administrators. I've learned so much from developers over the years, and I appreciate the time that they spend with me explaining how something works, why something works the way it does. And also I think going over it with the DBA, a lot of times you may start looking going, why do we do this way? Yeah, I never really thought about it, but explaining it to you, I realized that maybe we should redesign this. So let me think about this for a while. And anything going into production is ready. Support your DBA. If somebody's pushing on something to go to production and you as a developer know it should not, let your DBA know. Let them be the gatekeeper. Say, hey, I'm not in support of this right now. I'd like a little bit more time. Anything you can do, I'd appreciate it. They'll be glad to back you up because they don't want that in production. So when communication degrades, focus on the end user experience instead of the individual goals. A lot of times taking yourself out of it is important. Looking at it, how is it a value to the business? When you're having problems, what value can you offer to the business by trying to communicate better? Don't personalize again. Take yourself out of it. Remember to show respect. A lot of times because we are talking about, oh, your code sucks or your database sucks, it's really hard to show respect, and it's really hard not to take that personally. Try to take yourself back out, take a couple deep breaths, and communicate with respect. Consult each other when the opportunity presents itself. It's great when a developer says to me, hey, I'm writing this new piece of code on how this actual data process flows. Do you want to sit in and take a look at it? I'd really like it if you sat in on it. As a DBA, I can say, hey, this is how I'm thinking of writing the way this MART build works. Do you want to sit in as a developer and see what I'm doing with it? I think anytime you give that opportunity to share what you're doing with the other person, it builds camaraderie. You start to collaborate and you start to look to each other. Because, I don't know why I use the word possess, but have a higher authority there when issues do remain unresolved. Having a manager that you do trust to make that final decision. Say, we're having trouble agreeing, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this thing, but we're having trouble coming up with a final decision. So we're going to leave it to this person. This is the person that we go to when we can't agree. Having someone like that you can trust is incredibly important. When it's still not going well, review and verify that the expectations were clearly defined. Make sure that everybody's interests were, thought of as clearly as possible. Nobody was left out in the cold by what was expected. Verify that respect is being shown. I had a company that I came back to after a 6-month iteration with another company, and I was surprised at the degradation in respect. They didn't realize it. They were joking. They really did see that they were joking a lot of times, but a lot of the jokes were like your mama jokes and things like that, and people's feelings started getting hurt. And they were getting angry with each other, and they'd end up with some good yelling matches. The women in the office didn't like it very much and got really short-tempered. The guys in the office would act like it was all right, but they'd get angry after a while, and they were like, I'm not talking to him. No, he's a jerk. It was surprising how much of the productivity was impacted by this. People started working they'd isolate themselves, and they weren't collaborating like they once had. So a lot of times you may not even realize that respect has started to break down. don't allow negative competition. And this goes back to that same story, is that a lot of times it was negative competition. Hey, I've already got the .NET piece done. What's wrong with y'all? It seemed like a joke, but a lot of times people didn't take it that way, and they'd start getting insulted. It's incredibly important to try to keep that kind of competition out of the office, especially when you're in a very open office, which we all are most of the time these days. The cube walls are starting to break down, especially with agile collaboration and that. You've got walls that are much shorter, sound carries a lot farther, and people can get embarrassed. They're thinking, I'm doing the best I can. What's going on? And that's where you get into trust and confidence in the other's capabilities to complete their roles. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're here to do a job. They're professionals. They've been hired for that task. I need to respect them and give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to accomplish this. And then we need to live up to our own expectations. We are the ones we need to keep in check. Are we doing our jobs? Are we doing our part? Involve each group earlier in projects. Anytime you see somebody that you think, hey, you know what, the developer should have been in on this meeting. We're making this huge grand change to how, we're duplicating the development system, and this is going to keep them out of the development database for 2 days. They should be part of this. For the developer, they can say, we're, starting this brand new project, and this is going to be a huge impact on the DBA resources. They're going to have to do a huge release. They should be in on this project now. Think about the other group. And remember that the final decision, when you can't agree, goes to that higher authority, and that you agree that you will follow in their final decision. So what should the DBAs always do? Should always ensure that a development database are full in recent copies of production. Ensure that development has full access to the development environment. Grant access to performance metrics. And then this is where this goes into these first three. Less than a full copy allows assumptions to lead into testing scenarios. I don't know how often I have seen people where they're looking at a test environment, they look at a test and they go, well, we have to kind of calculate how it's going to be different in production, or I don't have a full set of data to work from, so this is how it worked in dev. This leads us to failure. A lot of times it's very quick for management to say is, oh, we'll use this old server for dev and test. Oh, we will only allocate this amount of disk for dev and test. You need to fight for that as a DBA. You need to fight for your developers and say they need to have a full copy. Otherwise, you're setting them up to failure. Otherwise, you need to sign off on a document realizing the risk that you're going to have to production. I don't know how often I have had people come back and say, well, I only have 30% of the data sitting in dev, so I can only, after all this performance tuning, I can only expect a 20% gain in production. And you start looking at what the actual issue is, and I explained this to somebody earlier today. It was PGA, and the PGA was the same. So the actual gain in performance was going to be the same in production. It's really hard when people start making these assumptions and calculations and they're trying to figure out what the difference might be. Nah, don't do this. Try to fight for full development test productions. Try to make sure that they are recent new copies when they're going into a project, and that you're refreshing them on a regular basis. One of the worst environments I went into, the actual development database hadn't been refreshed in 3 years and was literally only 12% of the size of production. The DBAs, the developers there, were set up to totally fail. I don't know how they were expected to do any development work in a database that looks so different from production. This is why they did most of their work in production and why they had 40% data corruption. You don't want to work in that kind of environment, and the turnover there was out of this world, out of this world. The quality of people there were incredible, and yet they just couldn't hold on to them because of this. And finally, if you have EM12C, grant them access. I've sat in sessions where people said, well, I'm not giving Enterprise Manager access to my developers. I don't know why. Well, they can see things. Who cares? I don't understand the reason why we have to hide this from our developers, why they can't view performance metrics, why they can't look at a database and see how it's performing for the day. It's not hard, and that's what I'm going to go into next. it's pretty easy to go into the EM12C because, you know, I hope most people have migrated to EM12C. They're off of their old ones, but if you want the way of setting this up in the older environments, I'll be glad to email you the process. But you can easily create a user, give them the EMAll viewer role, set up their targets, and I do give them access to monitor the enterprise manager too. I want them to be able to see everything. I'm not being secretive about it. I think it's important for them to see the entire enterprise environment, and they also know then what the DBA is up against and how much the DBA is working on. I think that helps, you know, because people talk about no one knows what the DBA is doing unless something's broke or destroyed. So it's kind of nice to know just how much the DBA has their hands on. I allow them to connect to any viewable target. Connecting to any viewable target can only be performed if they have a login to that database. If they don't have a login, they can't log into the target. So keep that in mind. This just gives them the ability to click on that target, put in a username and password, and log in. I allow them to view any target. And then at the bottom here, you can actually set up the targets at the bottom. I prefer, because most people have logins already to the databases, I set them up that way. I don't do it at the bottom here as you're seeing that option. You can review and submit. As you can see, I gave them EM user, EMAll viewer, and public. And I haven't set up the target privileges from here. You can do it like I said. And I gave them view any target, connect to any viewable target, monitor the enterprise manager. So for the target level logins, you can give them connect, view any dictionary, and then I give them advisor. Anybody who's concerned about view any dictionary, passwords aren't kept anymore in the database link, so that should not be an issue anymore for view any dictionary. I don't have an issue with giving them that. If you want to give them advisor, that allows them to do like the SQL tuning advisors and things like that. Those can be very productive for a developer if they want to learn and understand. Working with an actual developer and making sure that they don't implement anything that they're actually using it to view and then talking to you first. If you've built that trust with them, you can work that through. Because honestly, we can see when a SQL profile has been assigned to something. I think most people, if they understand that, they're not going to be fooling around with it. Object level privileges for AWR. If you'd like them to be able to run AWR reports, to be able to look at SQL level ID for AWR reports, these are the grants for that. They need to execute on DBMS workload repository. Other than that, they just need these selects. And then they can actually run any of the AWR ASH information from here. This is very beneficial for developers, teaching them how to fish versus having to fish for them. In dev and test, this is easy to set up for them, and then they can actually look at this performance data and have that already prepared, even part of a change release if you want. If it's some code that's, you know, high impacting, have all this data ready for the developer or for the DBA. Make it very simple for you to say, this is good, we're ready to go. So 101 on the actual grid. If you're seeing lots of red, anything in the pink, pink is not a girl's best friend when you're a girl DBA and looking at the grid. It's not. So pink, red, brown, you get to black, we're really going to have some issues. You don't want to see any of these. Green, CPU, good. Blue, we will tolerate unless you're going really, really crazy with the blue and it's gone over to temp. We're not going to be as happy about that. Red, we don't like. Red, we've got some concurrency issues, application issues. We're going to look at it. Orange is commit. Again, are you committing enough? Are you committing too much? Please be nice to our database. You know, the one at the bottom there is actually a buffered deadlock, which isn't very pretty either. These are not good, so always remember that. Green is good. Blue we'll deal with. You start seeing some of the other colors, we want to look at it. I had a really good database analyst, well, she was actually an application analyst, that monitored the systems for me for things that really wouldn't be caught by an alerting system. And whenever she saw something like this, she'd come and find me and go, Kellyn, somebody's doing something wrong. And she was 99.9% of the time right. So I trust her to make sure. And she would already have the information ready for me. And it was really nice having that second set of eyes. So what do developers need to know? They need to know the difference between an explain plan and an execution plan. You know, an explain plan, when you hear these terms, some people just say explain plan no matter what, but the explain plan is a choice the CBO may choose. It may be the one it took, it may not have been the one that took, but it's the one that it may choose. When someone says execution plan, this is the actual plan that the CBO made with a SQL statement. That means it is the one that it is executing from or has already executed and chose. So that's when you hear those two terms. Those are important. Learn how to view temp usage and learn how to use SQL Monitor after the DBA grants access. This is something that was introduced in 11G and that you're seeing with the EM12C a lot too. And I think it's a nice interface for developers to monitor actual activity in the database. So how do you build your plans in 11G? It's really easy to turn auto trace on. You just put this in front of your statement, set auto trace on, and then you can run a statement like select 1 from dual. It returns back 1, and then it gives you the actual explain plan, and then it gives you the statistics. It says how many recursive calls, block gets, you know, the bytes, and then the actual rows processed, any sorts to disk, memory. This is extremely valuable for you. It gives you very high-level information about what's going on in the actual statement, and it can be very valuable when you're trying to find out, did I actually write this query as effectively and efficiently as I should have? You know, we also use DBMS XPlan. I use DBMS XPlan daily. There's a lot of different ways to utilize this. I recommend, you know, looking up one of the Oracle fact charts on it. But this one here is just to display cursor and the format advanced on it. So you execute your query, and then you just say select star from table, DBMS XPlan, display the cursor, and I chose advanced on it. What's kind of fun about this is you find out this dual table actually has an outline on it, and it tells you a little bit about the outline. Gives you the explain plan, all the normal stuff, but I thought this outline data was kind of interesting. So what is the cost-based optimizer? The CBO determines the most efficient plan or efficient path to executing a SQL statement. The cost-based optimizer took over for the rules-based optimizer, and the rules-based optimizer just said, if there's an index, use it. There's a table, use it. You know, it was pretty basic. When you got into the cost-based optimizer, it allowed the actual Oracle system to make advanced choices in you know, anything from view merging to creating its own view on top of a hash join where it said, I don't really like these two tables, and I'm going to take full scans of these two tables and create my own little hash table off it, which really is kind of a view created in temp. You know, it did whatever it wanted to do and allowed it to make better choices and to access data faster. So the CBO choices are impacted by a number of things. It can be, of course, parameters such as optimizer mode, the session level parameters, so if somebody altered the session and set some parameter at that session level. Statement hints, so somebody can say use hash, use NL, nested loops, use hash for a hash, do a hash join. As I talked about dynamic sampling 0, don't use any dynamic sampling. You can set all different ones, there's tons of them out there. Statistics and dynamic sampling. Dynamic sampling, of course, can come in and say, you know, Oracle says, I don't think the stats are really up to par, or I'm missing stats. I'm going to do a sample on this table and try to come up with something a little bit better. In the dynamic sample, its goal is to offer you a better plan. So always remember that. And that's where you're probably going to see most often where a plan has changed. So always remember that with dynamic sampling. Parallelism, high DOP, high degrees of parallelism can cause a plan to change. And then complex design and the SQL. Now you'll notice that the statistics in the SQL are highlighted in red. The reason that they're highlighted in red is that these are the two highest areas of where change can occur. The way you write your SQL, complex SQL uses a lot of views upon views, things like that. That can impact the explain plan considerably. Statistics, how stats are collected, if they're collected very effectively, efficiently, not at all. This is going to impact the cost-based optimizer. Viewing temp and memory usage. You know that these slides will be available. I'm going to have them out on SlideShare and that for you guys to get any of this information. I like this SQL statement because it just grabs the PGA, the mem, the temp from the work area and lets you know what's going on. The example at the bottom tells you that, here's the actual SQL text, so it'll give you a little bit of the SQL text. It'll give you the SQL ID, it'll tell you what SID, and it'll tell you what kind of process it is, the operation, so you'll see the first one is a group by, the next one is an actual buffer. If it's using temp table space, it'll tell you what temp table space. This was always valuable to me because I had temp table space groups, so I wanted to see how effectively parallel processes would stripe across temp table spaces within a group. So I always show the actual temp table space. And then it will show you the actual PGA, memory, and temp. And as you can see in red, the second statement, which is the operation type, is a buffer. It's working within the buffer. It is using 23 megs of temp. So that's extremely valuable to actually grab that data. I do believe that if you're using a lot of temp, you're working hard. You're not working smart. Anytime that you can fit within that PGA, that allocation from the PGA that's given to your process and not swapped to temp, it's going to run a lot faster. So the SQL Monitor. The SQL Monitor is a really nice tool that came out, as I said, in 11G. The EM, and then with the EM12C, it's become a very integral part of monitoring. Has its own defined access to it within the EM12C console. And the nice thing about it is that it not only shows you a very high-level view of what's going on in the database, it has very clear indicators of what's going on in that high-level view. So if you're looking at the actual features here, you can see the difference. The first one here is active, a little green kind of circle. It's going to be active, it's going to be moving, and then you've got the check mark underneath that shows that this is an actual process that's finished. It's completed. And then you've got this next section over here, the database time. I always like this because it gives you a very high-level look at what wait events are included. This is I/O, of course, blue, and then you've got your green for your CPU, and then it's got an other for here that you'd have to look at. You can click on any of these, of course, and drill down and see more information about them. This occurs, of course, same thing with your I/O requests, and in any one of these that are highlighted in blue, you can click on. You can look at these again and start looking at, was there any parallel involved? This was really popular for me at one of my last companies because they used to issue parallel like crazy. Seeing how much was requested and how much is actually offered in parallel is important. So you may have, let's say they may have requested 16 and they only got 8. It would show it here. Having the SQL ID available and being able to click on it and go to the SQL details is also incredibly valuable because then you can go to the distinct information for that SQL. You can go to the plans. You can go, was there any plan history? You can go down to the statistics for it, how long has it been running. All this defined data is available to the DBA or the developer when you're actually working within the SQL Monitor. You'll also note to the left of the SQL ID is the instance ID. So it'll tell you, is this working on the first node or the second node for rack instances? So we're all in this together. I think that's one of the things that we often forget. Trust is one of the major important factors in this. Building trust as a DBA, I think, has really impacted us. A lot of times that we just want to be in control and we forget how important trust is. We need to work with this. Performance is part of the goal, not just functionality for the developers. Working with the DBA and ensuring that what goes to production doesn't impact production. If you aren't helping, you're hindering. A lot of people don't realize that. They say, well, it's a database, and I say it's not going to production, so it's not going. It's probably not helpful. It's more important to find out, is there a reason that this really shouldn't go to production? Make sure it's not a control issue. Make sure that it is for a reason, that there's data behind it for this decision. It's the business's database. It's no one else's. As a DBA, I'm there to service everyone on that team and the business. Making sure that I'm doing so is my priority. Being right is not always the same as doing the right thing. A lot of times there can be I don't know, there's a lot of different terms for it, but you'll have people challenging each other because they just want to be right. Sometimes it's important to be a little bit humble and step back and do the right thing. I've included some references here. You're going to see that there are a lot of these are a lot of fun. You know, DBA's gone bad. You know, the different ones of, you know, the prima donna developers. They're very interesting articles that I found, and you're welcome to click on any of these when you get the actual slides and check them out. My boss, Carrie Osborne, went and wrote Oracle Performance for Developers and the DBAs that love them. I have a very similar view on this as Carrie does, and I respect his view on this very highly. So definitely look at that too. It's from an old hot sauce presentation that he did. Oh, and I don't know why that came up. And last slide, if it'll ever go to it, it will not. We'll get to it one way or the other, guys. So there. If you have any questions for me, my email address is right there, along with my website, my Twitter handle, and how you can get a hold of me through LinkedIn. Please, ready to turn over back to James, and we can ask some questions here and get some answers.
Hi, Kellyn. Thank you again for presenting. I hope everybody has enjoyed the talk as much as I have. I actually tweet a couple of bits as well, so do check them out on Twitter at All Things Oracle. Particularly, one thing you were talking about, Kellyn, was SQL Monitor, and Doug Burns actually ran a webinar a few weeks ago on SQL monitoring for performance analysis, so that might be something interesting for people to check out.
Definitely.
Okay, so if you just bear with me whilst I look at the questions that have already come in. Now's your chance to put in a new question or something you'd like to ask Kellyn. So this is obviously a great opportunity for you to find out a little bit more. But we do have some questions in already, so I'm going to get going with these. Okay, so the first question is from Amir Shah. Thank you, Amir. So, Kellyn, our DBA group seems to lock horns with the system administrators and network administrators. Would you use similar tactics in dealing with SAs and network admins? What Amir kind of sort of added to this is that one slight difference is that developers need something from the DBAs, whereas DBAs need help from system administrators or network administrators.
Could you repeat some of that question? Sorry.
Sure. So what Amir finds is that the DBA group, his DBA group, seems to lock horns with the system administrators and network administrators. And he's asking that whether can you apply some of the points about bridging the gap, I guess, between developers and DBAs to DBAs and system administrators, particularly in the context that where developers need something from the DBAs, but the DBAs often need help from the system administrators. So I guess what Amir is sort of trying to say here is it's almost like a bit of a reversal in kind of where they actually need help and they're kind of more dependent on the system administrators, I guess, whereas the developers are sometimes more dependent on the DBAs.
I've worked with very good system administrators in my history. Very few times have I had any issues with them, but I can understand that. You know, I think it's important to, again, respect each other's skill set. That if they're insecure because they actually need this, you know, they need help from that group and they don't want to admit it. It's finding out exactly what the issue is between them. So if your system administrators are coming back and they're being a little haughty about it, or if the DBAs are just being impossible when they're dealing with them, I mean, I guess that's a challenge, you know, and it's, again, are they showing respect to each other? Are they working together? When challenges come up in the database, are they just pointing fingers at each other? That's what you got to try to figure out, and then from there apply those same aspects that I was talking about in the slides of showing respect, respecting each other for their skill set, No negative competition. When you think you're joking, it may not be a joke to other people, and resentment can build. Don't let that resentment build.
Thanks, Kellyn. So the next question from Stephen Martin. Thank you, Stephen. It's another long one, Kellyn, so I'll try and hopefully get it across a little bit clearer. So Stephen's point is that so full development access, i.e. copies of the live environment, bring issues for him or for his company with data protection, in that the developers would then be able to see the data from production on development. So for example, his HR database contains sensitive data and links to a number of other applications. So developers need access to this database, but database protection does not allow them access. So do you have any kind of tips on how to get around this? Should you just simply use test data only in the HR database? And in terms of the kind of companies that you work in, Kellyn, do you often see people put in a staging environment or some kind of sort of pre-production environment after testing as well?
Yes, they do have often staging. I do have one healthcare company that's very secure about their data. They do have a QA environment as well as test and development. They do use data masking to protect that data. When they actually refresh, they ensure with an actual data pump that none of that PII, any of the personal information that is HIPAA protected, goes from the production over. For monitoring, they're still able to monitor performance through the EM12C. So that's something to think about too. Monitoring versus actually looking is looking at the actual SQL, and that they can look at the SQL, stuff like that, with no problem. They can't see the data. So I think that's where we're getting that confusion in. Making sure that they have full copies of dev, test, for QA doesn't have to include the PII.
Thanks, Kellyn. Steve's also made an extra sort of point, or rather a comment here, which I know you'll enjoy. This is from a SQL Server perspective. Steve's asking, so in SQL Server, to give developers debugging rights on the development environment, they're required to be sysadmins, which he's not content in granting. Do you have any solutions from your experience on SQL Server?
I don't. Unfortunately, I am aware of that. SQL Server is much more integrated, and at the same time, think about the alter session grants that have to be given for developers or anyone else to do some of the things in Oracle, that for SQL Server they actually have a role that's secure. It's a give and take. I think that every database platform has something from another platform that could benefit it. How's that? But no, there is no answer to that one.
Okay, thanks, Kellyn. Next question from Mark Orit. Thank you, Mark. So Mark's asking, so Mark's actual question, I'm not sort of sure on your view on this one, Kellyn, so it'll be quite interesting. But Mark feels that there's potential. How do you work around the issue of developers' desire for views that help them understand the data?
Is this access, I guess, to DBA views and $$ views?
I guess so, yes. Mark, maybe you could clarify that? So no, not DBA views, but I guess Mark's just kind of talking in general about developers wanting views that help them
as a choice for querying. Yeah, I am against it. View, the word view is kind of a four-letter word for me. I've seen views atop views upon views, and anybody who's an EBS, DBA, you see this constantly. Oracle does it too, but it confuses the cost-based optimizer. Anybody who works heavily with cost-based optimizer will see challenges when you start doing complex views on top of complex views, that suddenly Oracle will get to a point and it's like, oh, I don't know, and you have poor choices. You end up having to hint, you end up having to force some plans. So I'm not a fan of complex views in any way, shape, or form. Same thing with materialized views too. Keep your materialized views simple. Do the code, do the actual reporting on top of them.
Thanks, Kellyn. So a question here from Wayne Smith, which is a very good point. So this webinar is being recorded. Unfortunately, I haven't updated the actual registration page on the Redgate website. As soon as this session has finished, I will update that. It will take a couple of days to get the video up there. But I will send everybody an email that's registered when that video is. Hopefully it's this week. It could be next week though, but certainly it will be available at redgate.com or /oracle-webinars. Thank you, Wayne, for checking the page out so soon.
And I'll upload my slides here too right afterwards.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. So a question from Kelly Foster. Thank you, Kelly. Kelly's curious to know the overhead considerations of multiple OEM users monitoring a busy database.
It's actually pretty minor. You know, the Enterprise Manager is moving more and more towards Ash Analytics. I don't know if anybody's worked at all in that, but you'll notice that it's very similar in the default views to top activity, and the reason is that of course is the Ash buffer, you read one way, it writes the other, and there isn't the overhead that you see with some of the EM stuff. So we will get there. The actual use of users on top of it is actually quite minor. I would say 3% at most, and I'm pushing it on that. I mean, each database is different, so it's hard to tell when you're saying percentage of what the actual resources and everything else are, but EM users are very, very small. And most of your actual push, remember, it's pushing, the agent actually pushes that data with the collection to the Enterprise Manager. The Enterprise Manager is the database that actually is showing all those pages. So that's where your actual resource usage is.
Thank you, Kellyn. Stephen Martin's got another question. Thank you again, Stephen. He's asking, what is data masking?
Data masking, I believe, came out in 11G, and it's the ability to hide data, actually, to encrypt data within the database so that it can't be seen by other users.
Fantastic. Thank you. Stephen's also interested, thank you again, Stephen, interested on sort of how you migrate databases from dev to des to production, including data masking. So thank you, Stephen, for so Redgate does have the deployment suite tools, which obviously help you migrate the schema and the data as well. Do you have sort of any experience, and do you use particular tools or processes for data masking?
No, I don't. Most of the data masking occurs within the actual system. You can do some of it through actual, excluding that data or specific data through data pump queries and things as they use data pump. Golden Gate has some tools as well. A lot of my clients use Exadata. So because I'm using Oracle tools and Oracle choices, of course, Golden Gate is the choice at hand.
Thanks, Kellyn. Next question from Callie Andrade. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Thank you for your question. Kellyn, could you expand a little regarding developers having full access to the dev environment? Does this include DBA access in development? What about individual named accounts?
Can you answer that question again, please?
Yep. So Kelly would like a little bit of sort of extra detail on how to grant developers full access to the development environment. Does this include DBA access in development? And the example that Kelly's got here is sort of what about individual named accounts at their current post? 15 plus developers and have to share 8 accounts.
Oh, wow. I don't often give them DBA privileges. They don't ask for it because I'm usually in an environment where I am the development DBA and the production DBA. What they usually do is they do get full access, as in they are the schema owner. They're able to work as the schema owner in the system. They have full access to the EM12C, the metrics there, performance metrics, things like that. Where I'm saying full access is, I've seen people where they say, oh, in development they're only allowed read-only access, and that they're only allowed to use the schema owner in time of actually, doing stuff with certain code. It can get a little ridiculous. If they need DBA access, though, I don't know how concerned I am unless there's actual database links and it's the company and the client. Different data is more secure than other. It needs to be more secure. But database links, things like that, are probably the most unsecure pieces that you have a concern with over actually the accounts and saying this is dev. Having DBA access, do they really need it? Why do they need it? I can see them having access to the data dictionary views and that for their actual use to make sure they can actually get into it. But even as myself as a DBA, it's to do particular things. I'm not going to give them access at the OS level and have them log in as Oracle. That's where we usually cross the line and say nobody wants somebody coming over to the developer and pointing fingers at them going, you can log in as Oracle, so obviously it was you too. You could have done this. I want to limit their accountability when it comes to stuff like that.
Thanks, Kellyn. So we've just got time for a couple more questions. If we're unable to get to your question, the recording of this session, as well as being put up on the Redgate website, I'm also going to put it up on allthingsoracle.com. The great thing about allthingsoracle.com is it does have a comments function, like most blogs, so you can ask further questions there, and hopefully Kellyn will be able to answer them on All Things Oracle. So we've got a question here from Stephen Martiak. Again, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Steve's asking, how do you manage expectations of current data in the development environment? Have you utilized Golden Gate to keep near real-time updates, then turn it off when they are running updates? Or do you give them static data copies on a regular basis?
I give static copies. Yeah, on a regular basis. Usually it's at the start of a project or beginning of a project. It'll be planned out with the development team of saying, I need a new copy to match production for this, and it'll be refreshed at whatever intervals that they need it for. They are responsible for backing up their own code. So anything that they're putting in there, anything they're working on, making them a team member, an active team member, and making sure they're backing it up, and then you refresh the dev or test environment.
Thank you, Kellyn. And Stephen, I would just like to add, if you do go to redgate.com/Oracle and check out Data Compare for Oracle, that tool will actually help you pull back configuration data, so from one environment to another, if that would also be useful in your development. Okay, so thank you again, Kellyn, so much for presenting today's session. Thank you, everybody, as always, for joining us today. I hope the session was useful. I certainly found that it was. Thank you again for everybody that sent some questions in. And again, you will have a chance to ask questions if something comes to you afterwards. I'll send you a link to the recording, so please do watch it and make sure that everything that you wanted to ask, you did ask, and maybe things will come to you as you're sort of trying to apply some of the things that Kellyn taught you to your own organizations. Please also do check out the upcoming webinars at redgate.com/oracle-webinars. So as I mentioned at the beginning of today's session, I will now be doing a demonstration of source control for Oracle. If you're interested in this tool, or you just again having some sort of your own sort of problems actually getting database changes into your source control system, please do hang around. If you're unable to hang around with this, you can check this tool out again at redgate.com/Oracle. Before I do this, I would just like to say thank you again to Kellyn, and thank you to everybody that turned up. Okay, thank you for hanging around. I hope this will be useful for you. Please just give me sort of a few minutes just to get my own environment across. So please bear with me for this short delay. So source control for Oracle is a new tool. It's something that we've developed at Redgate to form part of the deployment suite for Oracle. Before I go over the tool, I thought it might be quite useful just to bring up this diagram here, which hopefully gives a little bit of a sort of an introduction to what I'm going to show and how the tool works. So we've designed this tool to make checking in changes to source control really easy. So it enables the synchronization of database schemas directly with your source control system. At the moment, it supports SVN and TFS. So the idea being is that as you're working on your database in whichever editor that you're using, so you could be using SQL Developer, Pure SQL Developer, or Toad, it doesn't matter. This is a standalone application. So if the developers in your team are using different IDEs, that's great. They can all use this product to help manage the changes and check those changes into source control. So as a team's working on the database, source control for Oracle is going to be basically looking at the database, what's in the database, and looking at the same objects in the source control repository, and it's going to pick up on any differences and alert you and suggest that you check these changes into source control. So it's helping you kind of keep the database and source control in synchronization. So that's one side of it, but for those of you that are working with source control at the moment, you've probably got some way then of actually putting these changes, converting these schema objects into SQL files, into flat files, so that you can put them in source control. I'm guessing also that may be a bit of a difficult process. So as well as having the kind of the difficulties in actually knowing what's out of sync between the database and source control, it can be quite difficult to actually then convert those objects to SQL files and put them into source control. So source control for Oracle then takes care of that. And as you'll see from the demonstration in a moment, it really is as simple as clicking a button. Obviously, you'll see that I'll also put in a log message as well. Okay, so I've just brought up a remote desktop connection. So you have to bear with me because I need to I'll have to scroll around a little bit just so that you can see things. So I've got SQL Developer open at the moment. I've just got a script on here. This is going to actually help me do the demonstration. And for this first part, I'd like you to, I guess, to imagine that I'm just a developer on a team, and the team is all making changes to the same development database. So the script we've got open here, please ignore that. But what it's going to simulate that I've made some changes to the database, but I haven't yet checked these into source control. But as I mentioned before, source control for Oracle will pick up that I've made some changes and that the database is actually out of sync with source control. And if we look at the taskbar at the bottom, you can see this icon here for source control for Oracle, and it's got a little red dot on it. That's to indicate that there are new changes to the database that haven't yet been checked in to source control. So it's notified me of this. I can right click on here, and it's actually going to present me with what's known as a jump list. So I can quickly go to the project that has these changes. So I'm just going to click on this one here. This is the project with new changes. And now we're into source control for Oracle. So we can see the work that I've been doing at the moment is on, I've been editing two existing objects. So these are objects that are currently in source control. But there's a number of objects that aren't in source control. And we know they're not in source control because firstly, we've got a create here, whereas these two are edits, but also we've got this really nice side-by-side diff. So we can see that this particular table, widget locations, is in the database. We can look at the creation script here, but there's nothing in source control. So we've got a really nice visual clue here. If we look at these edits, we can see that there is something in source control because firstly we are editing an object, or it's going to edit the object in source control. But we can actually see the DDL side by side between the database and what's in source control, and we can see nice and easily that what we're actually doing here is we're just adding a new column. And again, if we look at the creation script in source control, this column isn't here. So that's the change that we're going to make. Now we can check all of these changes in together. So that's great. So you can bundle up changes and check them in all at the same time. At the same time, we can also check in individual objects. The source control for Oracle is quite clever because if we, for example, select this one here, which is a trigger, we've got a little warning that's popped up. And that's popped up because there are other objects that are dependent on this trigger. So it's just letting us know that some of the selected objects, reference objects, that haven't been selected for this check-in. And if we click on this little link here, it's then going to automatically check all of those objects in for us, or tick those objects so that we're going to check them all in together. What I'm going to do, I'm actually just going to check everything in, and I'm going to add a log message. So I'm using SVN, as I mentioned at the beginning. This product supports SVN and it also supports TFS as well. Okay, let's check those in. So we can see how easy that was. So the thing is, with source control for Oracle, it's going to keep on monitoring the work that I'm doing and that other members of the team are doing. So if I run this next script, go back into source control for Oracle, done here, and we're just going to refresh this. Again, it's going to pick up a couple of new objects, and we can see, again, we can look at the DDL here. So it's going to drop this table, and it's made an edit to this package. Interestingly, we can see here that so it looks like what we've actually done here. We've noticed that there's a bit of a mistake, I guess. We've got this idea here, +1, then we've got -1 and +1 again. So we're correcting that. The great thing is I can actually go into the history and I can find out the last time that package was checked in, which was, this package here. And we can actually see that. So we can see that before there was this and after this was the mistake here. So the tab that we're looking at now is the history tab. And this is going to show us a history of all of the objects that were checked in to source control. At the moment, for this example, it's just been me that's checking them in. But as you can imagine, if there were other members of the team, all of their usernames would be in here. Importantly, this is taken from the source control repository. So the users in this scenario, if you remember, we're all working on the same database. So the database is, I guess, always the most up-to-date version. But what will be out of sync is source control. So this is showing us who checked the changes into source control. And again, we can scroll down and we can see the create statements before and after. we can have a look at this particular one again. As I mentioned, we can see that, yep, that was a mistake, that was checked in. I checked that in on the last check-in, and then we should check these two new changes in. And as you can imagine, checking the changes in is exactly the same as before. Okay, so we've seen how it works in a shared environment. I guess this is probably the most common setup, and this is how you would be using the product. But you may also work in a setup where the developers have their own local copy of the database, or maybe they have a private schema on the same database, their own name schema on the same database. I know this is a question that came up in the webinar. And source control has an additional benefit. Source control for Oracle rather has an additional benefit if you are working that way. But it will also help you get set up in this scenario as well, if that's something that you're actually looking to do. So I'm just going to come back onto SQL Developer here, because I've got a schema open that you can see called Widget Michael, but this is a totally empty schema. And what I want to show now is I'm going to populate this schema. So this is trying to simulate that we've got developers who have their own copy of the schema but on the same database, and we're going to use source control for Oracle to manage changes between developers and their dedicated or private schemas. So if you imagine that Michael here is a new team member, we want to get him up and running with a new copy of the schema. We could obviously just copy the schema from the database. We could use something like schema compare to actually deploy those changes from my schema or from the shared schema rather to Michael's new schema here. But one of the points of source control is to kind of keep one central copy, so they're kind of like the master copy that everybody's putting their changes into. So what we'd really want to do is actually populate Michael's schema from source control, because we should be confident that the version in source control is the most up-to-date version, and I'm going to show you how we can do this using source control for Oracle. This will also enable me to actually show you how easy it is to get up and running with the product as well. So I'm aware I'm trying to do two things here, but hopefully just going through the setup will show you how easy it is to set up, and then you can see how easy it is to populate an empty schema from source control. Okay, so I'm going to create a new project. I'm using a TNS connection here. The database I'm using is Obstacle. I'm going to log in as Michael. I've got a nice little button here so that we can test the connection before we click on Next. So bear with me. I just needs to be on one line. That was meant to save time, but I probably could have typed that quicker. Okay, so here I'm just connected to a folder in the Subversion repository. So a folder in this repository. I could do the same if I was using Team Foundation Server at this stage as well. So I'm connecting here so I'm mapping this folder with Widget Michael. If you remember in SQL Developer, in the file tree, again, we were looking at this empty schema, which was Widget Michael. This is the folder that I've been using as my repository in Tortoise. I can actually bring up the repo browser here. So again, you can see that this was the particular folder, and again these were everything that we've been working on and checking in, and changes that are all under source control here. Okay, so select this particular folder. Gives us a nice little summary of what's going to happen. So the database here is Obstacle, linked to our SVM repository here, and we're mapping the Widget Michael schema with the widget folder. We can add another schema at this point too if we wanted to. Okay, let's create that project. So the main difference that you can see between these two projects, so this was the one that I was working on a moment ago, and here we've got some changes to check in, but what we've got here, the state of this one is actually, we've got some changes to get. So let's open this project here. So it's compared this empty schema with source control, and has noticed that firstly that the schema is empty, but more so that there's a load of items in source control that are not in this particular schema, and we can use source control for Oracle to populate this schema, which is what I'm going to do now. As you can imagine, what we're actually looking at here in terms of the way we're working is that if you are working with distributed development environments, if you have a private copy of the schema on the same database, you'll be able to get the latest changes as people check them in to source control. So I'm not actually going to show a check-in and a get latest and then a check-in from Michael. But as you can imagine, the process is exactly the same. So all we're doing here is before Michael starts work on anything in this schema, he's going to get the latest changes out of source control. So he knows, again, that he's working on the most up-to-date version. So to do this, we simply click on this button, which is Apply Selected Changes to the database. It's going to run through that. Let's go back to Michael's schema here, and if I refresh these, you can see this is now being populated. But as I mentioned before, the important thing is this has been populated from source control. Okay, so just to summarize, so source control for Oracle was launched this month, so it's a brand new product. It's an integral part of the deployment suite for Oracle. We've designed this to enable easy database source control with SVN and TFS. We will be looking potentially at other source control systems if you use them. I can tell you where to kind of add some suggestions if that's something you're interested in a moment. Please do check the product out. You can find out more at redgate.com/source control for Oracle. Just simply stick a hyphen in between the words. You'll find that, or go to redgate.com/Oracle and you can navigate to the product there. We do offer a 28-day trial. It's a fully functional trial, so please do download a trial, check it out, see if it's something that will help you out. So I hope that was a nice overview of the product. If you have any questions, please do ask them now. I'll be very happy to go over some of the things that I went through in the demonstration again as well. So I've got a question here from Daniel Pask. Thank you, Daniel. Daniel's asking, can you import different versions of the files in source control, not just the latest version? So absolutely. I mean, I guess when I'm thinking of working with source control, I'm expecting that what goes into source control is the latest version. But essentially, the way the tool works is it's just looking at the differences between the database and source control. So we've created a file system representation of a schema's data dictionary so it's basically as if this representation was just another database. So what you're looking at there is it's comparing the database to source control. So I would expect it to be the latest version, but of course it could be any version of the database that you've put under source control. We've got a comment here in terms of if you've missed if you just joined us, if you've missed part of this demonstration, or maybe you had some technical issues, this is being recorded. There are other recordings as well for a past source control webinar at redgate.com/Oracle. There is also a new session on the 10th of April as well, so please do check that out at redgate.com/Oracle-webinars. Of course, there is more information on the webpage as well. Okay, so no further questions at the moment. Please do feel free to get in contact with me. Okay, sorry, we do have another question. So this was from Aki Palanja, thank you. Again, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. So am I able to use Redgate source control for Oracle with Toad for Oracle? So the answer is yes, and one of the things that we wanted to ensure was that we're aware that teams are using different editors. So, I mean, I've got SQL Developer opened here. Some of you may use this, some of you may use Toad. In fact, in your team, there could be people using both or different ones. So Source Control for Oracle is a standalone product, so you can continue to edit your schemas as you normally would do outside of this program. Source Control for Oracle is just monitoring what's going on in the database, not within the editor. So it's the database that it's linked to, and the source control repository. So yeah, a long way around, but yeah, essentially you can use it, source control for Oracle with any IDE or any SQL editor. So no further questions. Thank you so much for hanging around for the demonstration. I hope it was useful. Please do check out the website, again at redgate.com/Oracle, and please do download a trial of source control. If you have any questions, please do get in touch. You can contact me at allthingsoracle.com. I will of course be sending you an email when the recording of this session is up, so please feel free to wait for that and reply to that. So thank you again, and I hope everybody has a nice day or a nice evening depending on where you are. Thank you.